All right. Welcome back, AP Psych. This is going to kind of finish the neuroscience chapter or the brain chapter and kind of go on to the consciousness/sleep chapter. So here we go. Maybe. So brain communication itself, as you probably read already, your brain is wired to the opposite part of your body. So anytime I move my right hand, the left motor cortex is causing that. And anytime I see something in my right eye, my left occipital cortex is going to process that. So, what allows the two hemispheres to communicate is going to be the corpus callosum. So, this is going to be a nerve fiber down the center of the brain. If you would detach or take away the corpus callosum, you would essentially have two brains splitting off from the brainstem itself. So the fact that we can see our world in a seamless, transitionless visual field and sense all the things we can, it's because the corpus callosum is allowing both sides of the brain to communicate and process information. So when we look at the brain itself, we know the brain is highly adaptive. It's obviously sculpted by our genes and our experience, but the brain can also modify and change itself as a result of an injury. We refer to this as the brain's plasticity. It's highly adaptable. In some cases, if you go blind, the occipital cortex will then start to reassign those neurons to other senses. Like if, for example, I cut off my finger, like my pointer finger, then that part of the sensory cortex is going to be devoted to my other fingers. So by losing one finger, the four that are left are going to be more sensitive. Like if a person goes blind after having sight, their hearing, their taste, their smell, those will usually increase. Like we'll be able to have better interpretation of those senses. So when we look at splitting the brain, in some rare cases, we will actually split the corpus callosum. So we would basically we would just cut those fibers, and then the brains would almost separate or open up. The reason why we'd be doing this is to treat severe epilepsy. Because if you look at what an epileptic seizure would be, all that is these hemispheres, there's too much information being processed back and forth. So it's almost like the brain becomes hyperactive and then becomes so hyperactive that it needs to shut down, or when you do shut down, it'll be in the form of an epileptic seizure. Very rare cases, medicine doesn't work, nothing treats the seizures. They have multiple seizures a day. But when they separate or split the brain, severing the corpus callosum, that decreases the epileptic seizures by about 95 to 99%. And in some cases, they never have a seizure again. So why would we split the brain? Obviously, the only reason is to treat epilepsy. We're talking multiple seizures every day. No medication works. So by severing that, that limits the brain activity. Does not going back and forth as fast. And thus will minimize or even eliminate the seizures. Once the corpus callosum is split, it's like having two independent brains. You can draw opposite, like you could draw a circle with your left hand and a triangle with your right at the same time. If your corpus callosum is connected, you're going to struggle with that mightily. And so when we look at the last part of this, consciousness itself is just a state of awareness. You have your feelings, sensation, ideas, perceptions. You're aware of your surroundings. There's different stages or different levels of consciousness. Like you can be fully alert. When you wake up, you're probably not processing everything. You're still drowsy, but you're still aware to an extent of your surroundings. So consciousness can range from a state of full alertness to limited alertness. Altered states of consciousness can be best described as not fully attentive, and these would range from daydreaming to hypnosis. And these can happen spontaneously, daydreaming, physiologically. You deprive yourself of food, you will go into a different state of consciousness. You won't have total awareness. You'll really be worried about your hunger, and then psychologically, this could be like hypnosis or meditation. Now, when we look at neuroscience and consciousness, your cognitive neuroscience, the main thing we know about consciousness, it takes all the parts of the brain working together to give us this feeling of consciousness. Psychologists still not fully aware or know why we have the conscious experience we do. We know it's the interaction of these brain parts, but how these brain parts interact and what pieces go to make this puzzle of consciousness, it's still highly debatable. And then when we look at the levels of consciousness, the main thing we're going to look at here is the iceberg model from Freud, because this is the part of the consciousness we're aware of, but the brain itself, deep within the parts, there's different levels or different parts of consciousness. So here we have the conscious mind, the pre-conscious mind. That would be stuff that memories you have, but you're actively not thinking about. And then the rest of it would be the unconscious mind. And these would be things you're not aware of that you're thinking. Like you're not aware of your medulla controlling your heart rate, your breathing, your blood pressure, but it's still happening. So this would be things you're aware of, things you could possibly be aware of or bring back into your conscious light. And these are things that we have little to no control over, or we're not aware that they're happening at all. So that's why we look at the iceberg as the main model, because we know a little bit of what it does, consciousness, but a lot of the conscious processing, we're not aware of it. And then we look at conscious processing and information processing. Unconscious and pre-conscious mind processes information simultaneously, multiple tracks, automatic, fast. Conscious, this is the stuff you need to pay attention to, and it's going to be slow and take effort. So like while you'd be sitting in a classroom, unconscious and pre-conscious, your mind is processing potentially things that are related to your experience now, like things that have happened in the past. And then your unconscious, like the temperature of the room at times, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the feeling of your back on the desk, you're not processing that all the time. In fact, a lot of times you don't even notice your feet are on the floor until someone brings it to your attention. And that shows how your conscious and unconscious processing can kind of go back and forth. When you look at information processing, psychologists, we do have evidence of conscious and unconscious processing of the mind, so we know the unconscious mind works. It's there. Is it what Freud said? Probably not. So when we look at the conscious processing, we know that image is a bird. Okay, the unconscious, though, what you're not aware of that is happening, so you can process that this is a bird, the form, the color, the motion, the distance, they're all seen at the same time. So since that's multiple tracks, different levels, that's our unconscious process. Conscious is just you allowing to know that it's a bird. Like if this didn't happen and this parallel processing had to happen consciously, then you would have to look, okay, it's form of a bird. You have to blink, refocus, look at the color, blink, refocus, look at the motion, blink, refocus, look at the distance of the bird. So it's almost like you would have to look at an object 4 to 5 different times and refocusing each time to get the full picture. So like if we didn't have unconscious processing, a majority of the things that we get to do that we enjoy, we wouldn't have time for, because we'd be still trying to process information in our environment. That's it for plasticity. Remember the corpus callosum, remember why they sever it. And then if you have any questions on the conscious processing, don't be afraid to ask.